Let's go right now to Congressman Dave Brat, Republican, 7th District of Virginia. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, John. Yeah, I had myself on mute. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, buddy. That happens. Hey, Dave, lots to talk about today. Let's start with Obamacare super implosion. Right now, the president pulling the plug out of these CSRs. Now, you say, what are the CSRs? Well, these are the payments going from the Treasury to big insurance companies. They were never mandated or appropriated by Congress or the Trump administration, Dave, although they said they made these payments for 8 months and Obama made them for about 50 months. They say, well, they're illegal because, well, Congress has to appropriate funding. It never got appropriated. Comes out to about $7 billion annually. And the Trump administration says, no, we're not going to continue to throw good money after bad. We're not going to bail these insurance companies out. And Congress is going to have to do their job, stop holding fundraisers, get back to work and figure this out. Dave Brat, what do you make of this whole thing?
Yeah, well, you just laid out some numbers that, if you think about them for a minute, I mean, all the talking heads, the Democrats over the weekend are saying Republicans are sabotaging. That's their new word. They look up the most exciting, exotic word for the week. We're sabotaging the entire healthcare system, which is, 1/5 of the economy, about, $3 or $4 trillion. Go write that number down, $3 or $4 trillion. And then you just mentioned $7 billion in payments. Well, $7 billion in payments cannot take down a $4 trillion issue, right? So right off the bat, something's just way off with the numbers. And then secondly, the mainstream media also forgets to mention the key little detail that these CSR payments were unconstitutional. They're the exact same thing as President Obama's DACA. You cannot go to the Treasury and take money out of the Treasury if you're the president. In the Constitution, the Congress has the sole authority for the power of the purse. And so the equivalent, just so the left can comprehend this, they have a hard time following these constitutional issues, but it'd be the same as if Donald Trump went to the Treasury and took out a check for $100 billion to build the wall without going through Congress, without asking anybody. The president just goes to the Treasury and says, give me money for what I want right now. That's the exact equivalent of what's going on here, but the mainstream media won't even mention that, right? That decision of unconstitutionality has been backed up by a court, and then the Democrats will say, well, it's still being adjudicated. I mean, that's the best they have. And so it's really getting embarrassing for the other side. They've created a system that's failing in order to cover for these costs. The premiums have been announced on this is all just in the individual market, right? Which is a smaller piece of the market, are going to go up 40 to 50% last year. And then if you hear some of the Democrat senators on the news, it does turn out at the end of the day that the taxpayer is still on the hook, right? So what these people lose in the subsidies, they're going to pick up at the other end by the tax credits. And so actually, the Democrats say people are, going to die and Republicans are doing terrible stuff, all totally false. What's lost on the subsidy side is going to be picked up on the tax credit side, and everybody's going to get reimbursed by the taxpayer as usual. And so, I mean, it couldn't be a more misleading narrative, but that's what we're used to. I mean, that's why the country is falling apart right now, because the economics is just not understood by the left right now, and so they created a system that has an oxymoron in it called Obamacare markets. That is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as an Obamacare market. A market in economics is where suppliers and demanders get together to do business.
Right.
What we have under Obamacare is a monopoly where suppliers are told exactly what product they will offer by the all-knowing central government planners. And there are only 3 products, and they're all overpriced, and they all have a $6,000 deductible. And then the demanders, all of us that go out and shop, are not allowed to shop and find creative products that vary that we would like to have. Like most college kids would like to go out and buy an inexpensive catastrophic insurance plan. They cannot do that because there is no such thing as Obamacare markets. And, this takes more than 2 sentences to explain. And so the mainstream media and the left have an advantage because they just operate sound bites and call names. But if you do the economics and you think for a living, the American people are starting to pay attention to those who can explain what's going on, like your show does every week.
All right. I want to thank you for that, Dave, because, it's very difficult because exactly. I mean, the Democrats are going on television right now saying just what you said. People will die. Subsidies are gone. Nobody with pre-existing conditions will all get tossed out in the street. All a false narrative. Let's go back to the CSR thing. Dave, you've still got $7 billion that the federal government, illegally or not, has been paying to insurance companies for a very long time, and basically 8 months under the Trump administration. So logically, it says if you take the $7 billion out, the insurance companies aren't just going to take the hit for that. So in the short term, they're left with two alternatives in lieu of the $7 billion. One is get out of the system, say, look, we're no longer going to be a part of the Obama exchange because we're going to lose money on it. That's number one. The other thing is they can't do anything with the subsidies because those are mandated. So if you're 100, 200% of the poverty level and you're getting Obamacare subsidized, that's not going to change. What changes is the $7 billion goes away, which means if they stay in the exchanges, Congressman, the only alternative they have is to increase premiums beyond what they are now, right? I mean, that's the math.
That's right. But don't get any tears in your eyes. Remember, the insurance companies, the biggies, are the ones that walked into the White House looking at their shoe leather 7 years ago when they knew they were doing a terrible trade-off for the American people. They knew they were going to get 20 million new customers and that you're going to put in place a near monopoly structure. And so right now they're still all making $1 billion or $2 billion in profits a year, right? And so you've got 170 million customers over on the employer-provided side where they're making money, and then they're losing some money on the individual side. And they are conservative firms, and they're smart. And so, I'm sure they've planned for this contingency. And so I think they can ride it out and survive this year or two. And it may not take that long because President Trump said, look, I'm doing this because it's unconstitutional. The Democrats, if they really want to improve things, they got to quit talking and they got to come to the table and negotiate. And so we'll negotiate, and we'll negotiate these CSR subsidy payments if they'll allow us the latitude to bring the price of health care down. And, I'd welcome that at a debate anytime. Why won't the Democrats come to the table to allow us to reduce the cost of your health care out there? It's pretty stunning. They only want this total government-run, high-price, high-premium care with about $5,000 deductibles. And no one can use the health care insurance policies they have when the deductible's that high. The average American has $400 in savings right now. And so that's where we are. The Republicans are getting our act together, I hope, on tax. We're going to get that thing through, get the economy moving again, and then put some money back in people's pockets so they can afford this health care. And that's our plan, but the Democrats have no such plan.
Dave, let's get back to these CSRs, the payments that have been ostensibly illegally been made. And so everybody knows what these are. These are disbursements to big insurance companies, kind of like a bailout, right?
Yep.
So the question is now, the president has done a couple things to pull the underpinnings out of Obamacare in the last week, letting people buy insurance across state lines. That's number one, saying that insurance companies can offer different things that were not mandated with Obamacare. That's going to hurt the whole system. Now pulling out the share payments, what they called cost sharing reduction. So he's put the ball back to Congress. Now, some Republicans are saying, well, now what we have to do is get together with the Democrats and bail the insurance companies out and just make these payments legal. Do you see that happening?
It could be. We really mess things up right before Christmas every year. I think you know that better than anybody. And so that is a distinct possibility. But I will just say, after, you said I'm a trailblazer and all that, so I appreciate that. And it takes you a while to figure out what that means after our big win. But then after Trump's win and after Bernie did so well, the mainstream media still hasn't figured out what this is all about, right? And it's all about the swamp.
Right.
And so now you've got a bunch of us running in 18, and still the main theme out there is the swamp is out of control. And so voting to bail out insurance companies, the biggies right now, right, when the small guys are losing their businesses, would just be so toxic, I cannot imagine it. And President Trump has said that, he's not going to allow a narrow vote like that. He wants to combine it with some health care reform that allows people to buy cheaper premiums. So that's the good news. So hopefully our leadership will get the memo, but sometimes they miss that memo. And so hopefully that's how it'll work out. And all those pieces you just mentioned in terms of Trump loosening the standards and et cetera, that's all hopeful signals, but not much of that can happen because Obamacare is the regulations. That's what Obamacare is. And so until you loosen up some of the regulations and allow some latitude, there's no way for price to go down, right? So you can open up competition across state lines, but that just means you can go across state lines to buy a monopoly product called Obamacare.
Right.
So until we fix that fundamental problem, the other fixes are harder to show people where the benefit's going to come from.
All right, so Congressman Dave Brat, the bottom line here is the president is pulling the pins out of Obamacare. He's kicking it back to Congress to solve it, right?
No, that's right. And he's just saying, look, it's bombing. Democrats, do you really want to fix it, or are you just talking?
All talk. All right, let's get to the Iranian situation. The president on Friday saying he's not going to recertify the deal with Iran, but again, kicking that back to Congress and saying you guys have got to decide whether or not you want to go forward with more sanctions on Iran. Then his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, saying, well, let's just, take a look at this, see if we can't get it back to the table, renegotiate a better deal. Which is it?
Well, it's going to be Trump's vision at a minimum, I think, and it could get stronger. And just as a reminder, I was one of the few people who voted no on that thing. I took some heat on that, but I talked with the leaders of Israel back at the time, and some people were urging for bipartisan compromise, go down the middle, it won't be that bad if Iran gets its hands on ICBMs in 10 years, et cetera. And I was like, you got to be kidding. I said, what does Netanyahu say on this? Is he a yes or a no? And Israel said, Netanyahu's a no. And I said, well, count me in as a no, right? I said, you got to be kidding me. And so that's what this bill does, right? We had Iran on its knees with the current sanctions that were in place back then. And we signed a deal which weakened our case, got rid of a bunch of the sanctions, and lets them go forward on a 10-year window where at the end of 10 years they can end up with nuclear material and ICBMs that are designed to hit our country.
Unbelievable.
Whereas,
that makes
a couple of years ago they couldn't. And
makes
so,
no
it
sense.
puts us in a worse position.
Absolutely. Hey, I've got to take off. For more information, go to davebrat.com. That's davebrat.com.